90 minutes.
90 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so
So-
but Q&A would be half and half? I mean, what do you think?
As you would.
Okay.
At least 30 minutes, if not
Yeah,
more.
yeah, sure.
Okay, but feel free.
Sure.
If you go over 50 minutes, I'll wait. Okay.
You stop me.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. So welcome back. So today we have a friend and colleague, Uzi Rabi. Uzi is he's a senior researcher and the former head of the Moshe Dayan Center. Now he heads the regional cooperation connected to the
Moshe Dayan Center.
Center. He's a professor of Middle East Studies in Tel Aviv University, and really was at the forefront of really work on the Abraham Accords, but also an expert on the region, on Iran, Iraq, and the social movements in the region. And I think at the forefront of also trying to wake up people in the West who had an archaic view of the Middle East. Like if you look at a map of the Middle East, Uzi used to teach of Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, people in the West somehow, because I guess the maps were drawn in institutions like this, we assume the Sykes-Picot stamp of reality was really resonated on the ground, but Uzi would always show how these societies were much more complex and the boundaries not so accurate, especially in this time, day and age. So Uzi is going to speak today. His title is Geopolitical Resolution in the Middle East and its ramifications on Israel's status in the region and beyond. So he's really one of the most foremost experts on these issues. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Charles. It is really, really great being here, and what I am going to do is just to share with you some of the insights we do have about our ever-changing region, the Middle East. What I can tell you is that in the recent months, there has been a tumultuous change in the Middle East, something that is unprecedented in terms of geopolitics, sort of an earthquake. And of course, this is the nature of the Middle East. It is an ever-changing region, and if we would like actually to stick to reality and create or to foster our future in a relatively speaking successful way, we have first to internalize what the changes are, and then in real time to create kind of a response or an agenda or a modus operandi that would meet the new requirements of reality. So, we are almost 2 years after the atrocities of the 7th of October in Gaza. Everything started from Gaza, a tiny, small territory nearby Israel and Sinai, which was to open up a totally different chapter in Middle Eastern politics. So I'm going actually to first provide you with some details about it, how to look at it. Second, to make sure that you understand that since everything here comes from times immemorial, reality cannot be explained with only what happened yesterday or today. We have to just link it up to what we call actually historical or historic constructions, and via that to better explain what's goes on. Well, I'm sorry for the Hebrew, but it doesn't matter. I am going to just use that. This is where everything started. You see, this is Gaza. This is Gaza. Just more than 350 kilometer square, being ruled by Hamas. What is Hamas? I guess you know. It is in Arabic, حركة المقاومة الإسلامية, which means the movement of Islamic resistance. This is very, very important. They do resist everything, especially stuff that is being related to the West one way or the other. and Israel, let me just put it from the beginning, Judaism is a problem, but not the problem when it comes to those troublemakers. The problem is that Israel is a byproduct of Western imperialism in the Middle East. So in a way, while looking at Israel, this is the remnant of Western imperialism in this region, a leftover by which to secure and preserve future interests of the West in this region after Britain and France had to leave the region in the aftermath of the Second World War. That is the basic thing here, and we have to be familiar with that. Currently, Palestinian realities are being divided into two main spots. The first of which is Hamas in Gaza, that since 2007, so we almost actually closing the second decade of that, and Palestinian Authority, people of the one-time Fatah movement, they are ruling the West Bank. This is basically how they define this territory, West Bank of River Jordan. Israelis tend to name it, most of them today, Judea and Samaria, which actually echoes the names that were given to these places during biblical times. So you see, Israel is not different than any other Arab state. We do live in history. We shape the way we look at reality by using history, and we have to understand that. Because here, this is cradle of civilization. And I'm saying that with all respect to, I don't know, United States of America, 250 years. That sounds like many years, but in comparison to the Middle East, it's not that much. If you take Persia, Babylon, Mesopotamia, thousands of years. So proportions are very, very important when it comes to that. Let's move to the Levant, okay? Especially Syria and Lebanon. Those two were created 100 years ago by France. Lebanon was torn up from Syria. It was named then in French Grand Liban, which is Greater Lebanon. What was to become of them is two different states, Syria, white, and Lebanon. And in the recent months, dramatic changes were to be seen in both states, and this is something that has to be taken into account because it is a byproduct of the 7th of October atrocities. So everything started from Gaza, but in sharp contrast to many, many rounds of violence between Israel and Hamas that were mano a mano, now it became something that has regional repercussions. The first region to be dealt with in our analysis is the Levant, basically what we call Syria and Lebanon today. Just a minute. And of course, just to complete the whole thing, we are moving from Gaza to Tehran. Okay, this is our spectrum. Gaza, Little Gaza, and Iran. A state of 90 million people, greater, coming up with a very, very well-known historic narrative not an Arab country, a Persian one, which is a totally different people. Like the Turks, they are coming up with a different agenda, but this is the forest, okay? When we go into the Middle East, this layer, which is much more come up with simplistic and generalistic terms, cannot be used. It's not Muslims and the others. We have many, many people, many languages, Kurds, Turks, Persians, Arabs, Azeris, Baluchis, etc. Each one of them is people by itself, with a language by itself. I mean, this is something that we have to respect. It is very, very diversified, a lot of colors, a lot of narratives, and everything is time immemorial. So it is very, very difficult to deal with the Middle East. Because you have to just be well aware about what I call the cultural difficulties or differences, which are very, very important here. Now, what happened that should be reckoned with in the recent months and constitutes a sea change in the Middle East? Mainly that. This was a program by which to destroy the Zionist entity. In Persian, it is called Regime Sahyonistic. Where is Israel? Don't forget, this is the yellowy stuff here. This is Judea and Samaria. What Iran, since I have another lecture which deals specifically with Iran versus Israel, so I won't delve into too many details now, because we'll keep the stuff for Wednesday. Wednesday? Yes, Wednesday. But look at that. Iran since 1979 became kind of a very, very radical Shiite, religious, inspired state with a whim to export the revolution. Of course, all these things actually can be depicted in Persian because these were the main issues Iran came up with. But look at that. I think that you should do that. The program was to suffocate Israel. How to suffocate Israel? It started 46 years ago, or maybe 40 years ago, which is the beginning of the 80s. In the last or recent century, the stuff was very, very clear. This was a combination of, a very lethal combination of both Ayatollahs and the people of the book. Okay, Ayatollah is the hand of God, and revolutionary guards who do constitute the sword, which is kind of a little combination of sword and book. And in between, in the Revolutionary Guards, there is kind of a very special unit called the Jerusalem Force, in Persian, Miroyakats, which was to export the revolution, create all these proxies all over the region, equip them or provide them with missiles of all range. And the plan was that even when Iran is being attacked by Israel, everybody would rise to the occasion, bombarding Israel with, in aggregation, 1,000 missiles a day for at least 70 days. This was kind of a rhythm. Israel could not, of course, weather, or survive. Look at that. Of course, every arrow is being ended up with a proxy. Lebanon, it's Hezbollah 40 years ago. This is Syria starting from 2011, Arab Spring. This is Iraq, Hashid Sha'bi, starting from 2003 when Saddam Hussein was toppled. Now, I don't have time to deal with you about that, but when a Sunni leader is being toppled and be replaced by a Shia leader, this is a revolution. This is not something that by which to say, we got more of the same. As people said, for example, in Syria, when Bashar al-Assad was ousted, and the alternative was Ahmed al-Shara or Mohammed al-Jawlani. It's not the same. You know why? Because the whole orientation of the newly created Syria after Ahmed al-Shara is totally different than the one which was during Bashar al-Assad's time. Same goes here in 2003. Until 2003, the erstwhile enemy of Iran was ruling Iraq. His name was Saddam Hussein. When he was toppled and a Shi'i government was to be compiled in Baghdad, the whole story actually was to change because the gates westwards were to be opened for Iran, and Iran managed to create kind of a corridor all the way to the Middle East. In other words, Israel. Of course, in the process, they smashed very weak Arab states that has become sort of autoimmunic in their ability to control themselves, and even were damaging themselves in bloody civil wars, 1, 2, 3, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. By the way, all these states were created by the British and the French 100 years ago, and they were pretty twisted from the beginning. So what we see is kind of a later outcome of a very, very twisted build-up of state and societies here. Houthis here, Shiites here in Yemen, were to suffocate Israel too, but also to put Saudi Arabia, an erstwhile enemy of Iran, in a sandwich which is not that comfortable. Up, down. Saudi Arabia. UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, all these states are stuck in between, and more often than not being taken as political or international hostages by Iran if and when it is being attacked by either United States or Israel. Oil here, Strait of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, Suez Canal. Remember that the trick in the Middle East is how to create a smooth transition, cheapest and the most comfortable from east to west, to Marseille, to London, where we stand now. The Middle East is in the middle. Okay? This is Africa, this is Europe, Central Asia, Far East. Just look at it. Make sure you understand why it is so important, on top of energy and stuff. This does not exist anymore, because when Syria was revolutionized, so to speak, and became Sunni with Ahmed al-Shara, Syria was turned in no time into the most dangerous spot for both Iranians and Shiites. Not only not anymore part and parcel of this whole issue, but kind of a spot which would prevent Iran to get back. You get it? Revolution. Iran was at its height, full flower, when the atrocities of 7th of November were carried out. For them, actually, the way they looked at it was that the end of Israel is in the offing. They were pretty sure that Israel's weakness lies in the very shaky resilience of its own public. And since what Hamas was doing is to invade Israel and occupy part of it, even if for 48 hours or so, that was enough, actually, for the bad guys to jump to the conclusion that Israel is doomed. The miracle was that they didn't let Hezbollah here invade Israel on top of the Hamas invasion. No. Because if that was to happen, we were to end up with 1,000 hostages that one way or the other were to be shifted to Iran, and all these things that I'm telling you about were not to happen, because Israel as a democracy doesn't know what to do when even just one hostage is being held by those criminals. Those criminals doesn't need planes, no tanks, nothing. Just to have a dead hostage or alive hostages being kept by them, and this would be suffice to subordinate a democracy. This is their modus operandi. Since here there were no hostages at all, Israel could come with full power, performing its advantages when it comes to military technology. Things that are fascinating by any standard. What happened here is, even now, seems to be unbelievable. Practically, I mean. But the change is here. And Syria is very important here, because not only Iran is not there anymore, somebody is coming from the up. We are talking about Erdogan, and it is always like that in Middle Eastern geopolitics. When the Persians are getting weaker, it is being, or the vacuum is being filled in by the Turks and vice versa. So Turkey is here, and of course Turkey has its own dream, let alone Erdogan, because he is running with kind of a film or a narrative in his back of mind by which to restore the one-time glory of the Ottoman Empire. Just remember that all these territories were controlled until, before the First World War by the Ottomans. Ottomans were to rule here. Names of territories were written in Ottoman Turkish. It's not that long. And of course, this is something that we have to take into account while dealing with that. A geopolitical revolution. this guy was to pay a bitter price. This is Nasrallah, the one-time General Secretary of Hezbollah. In other words, we can say that 40 years Lebanon has been kidnapped by Hezbollah, and Hezbollah turned it into an Iranian fiefdom, very, very close to the Mediterranean, eastern flank of the Mediterranean, or Israel. This guy actually was a real concern for Israel, because what he has managed to build up in Lebanon is a bastion of more than 100,000 missiles. Tunnels, headquarters all over Lebanon, especially in the south. Israel actually was very hesitant in waging a war against him for years, because it went without saying that the opening up of or waging a war against Lebanon in order to prevent him from becoming that strong would create kind of a regional war, something like that. And it was capitalized by him. He rose to the occasion because he understood that Israel is very hesitant. And what he came up is, you know, very, very outspoken speeches where he was boasting and threatening Israel. To make a long story short, I guess you actually are familiar with the saga of the pagers and what happened there. This was kind of a psychological shock that was left there, and from thereafter, Hezbollah was not to be the same organization or movement it used to be. Iran was to be evacuated afterwards home. Hezbollah became weaker, and Lebanese were rethinking about restoring the one-time past of Lebanon, which can be summed up in Arabic. It was depicted 60 years ago. Lebanon was depicted as Suisrat al-Arab. Suisrat al-Arab means Switzerland of the Arabs. This is how actually it was perceived by many in the region and beyond. The jewel in the crown of the Middle East. It was ruined 40 years, and now we, of course, have to wait and see. But this is what we are having here. With Hezbollah out of the picture and Syria being turned into something totally different, Sunni, anti-Iranian, the way was open for Israel to attack Iran. Now, I won't delve into too many details about Iran because we are going to talk about that on Wednesday. But remember that those guys actually were that close to get nuclear capacity. Now we know it. That close. I'm not saying that they cannot re-fulfill their whim, but now it would take them 2 years or so. Natanz, Arak, Kermanshah, Esfahan, and of course Fordo. Israel was assisted in the end by a completing leg of the Americans, because they have the mother of all bombs, so to speak, in order to take care of Fordo. But basically, it was Israeli-made fascinating thing that we'll just develop that if you don't mind. It leaves behind kind of effect. In a way, when it comes to a conventional army, not a bunch of barbarians like Hamas, which couldn't care less about how many Gazans are being starved or dead. But when it comes to a conventional army with a state, this is a scar that was left behind to be internalized by everybody in the Middle East. You can harass Israel, you can attack Israel, you can damage Israel, but beware. Beware, because the final outcome would be far more or pricier for you. I'm not saying that in kind of a way by which to wage a war, not at all, of course, but this is something that we have to take into account, because in Israel many people, and this is kind of a criticism I do voice actually when I'm being asked as well, many people are or tend to understand the world by Western standards. Many Israelis would identify themselves with Europe or other continents, very realistic, enlightened, what have you, you can just go on. Not with the Middle East. The outcome is that most Jews in Israel haven't got a clue about Arab culture, while 20% of the Israeli citizens are Arabs. I want you to have kind of an idea about the peculiarities of the oxymoron. So I'm dealing with so many cultures, I haven't got a clue about their history, language, back of mind, visions, state of mind, whatever. And when I'm dealing with them, I'm doing what I am so efficient in, military force, believing that this by itself would be enough. Now, 7th of October atrocities and what happened afterwards tell us loud and clear that this is not enough. You have to penetrate the other's domain also by using cultural, linguistic, and other layers. This is Amkelavi. This is the name of the operation against Iran. And just to put kind of the bottom line, Iran is not the state it used to be before. I know that there are many, many rumors about Iran, what they're going to do, how they are going to be recuperated, to what extent, how fast they can do that. But if you look at what's going on in Iran, dealing with the economy, with the shortage of water and electricity, so dire conditions when it comes to basic infrastructure. When you are browsing the internet and listen to the voices coming from Tehran, from Isfahan, from different circles in the Iranian population, you understand that a breach had been created between rulers and ruled. We don't know yet actually what does that mean about revolution, but we'll have to wait and see. 1, 2, 3. B2, Fordo, and Trump. I haven't mentioned Trump till now, but this is kind of a very, very important element to be reckoned with, because this is the first American president, or maybe Western leader, that is not acting in normal way when it comes to Middle Easterners. It's totally unexpected. They don't know how to eat him or how to understand what he says. And basically he says the thing and its opposite in the same sentence. So everybody is highly confused in the Middle East. We know that he wants to lock up open disputes, which means Gaza and Tehran. Knowing that after having that, the Middle East could be summed up as a region which enjoys a relative lull, so to speak. Until this moment, even if we heard a lot about the forthcoming agreement in Gaza or in Tehran, nothing happened. Which means that, once again, your wishful thinking is jumping ahead, and you take into account that what you think is going to become is something that is similar to the way your enemy thinks of the situation. This is, of course, totally, totally different. And Israel could tell you a lot about that. You crush Hamas militarily. Crush them. But they have their hostages. And they teach Israel how a nasty and cruel bunch of barbarians who are taking radical Islam and twisted notions of Islam in order to create kind of a policy of demonizing or dehumanizing Jews. You know what? We have to just learn a lot about that in order to know how to deal with that. Democracy cannot win them over. This is my bottom line. Of course, many Israelis are being irritated by me saying that you cannot. If you would like actually to have your hostages back, they're going to take from you almost everything. They're going to bring you back to status quo ante and beyond. But what can we do? We are a liberal democracy. Lives of human beings are the most important thing for us in Israel, especially as these guys were deserted by the army and the state, were neglected. So this is where we stand. How about an agreement with Iran and the United States? What Trump is saying is that they cannot be allowed to enrich uranium whatsoever. And they have to shift out of Iran every pile of enriched uranium at their disposal. What do they say to him? Never. You are crazy. that is going to be very bad for you. Words. But as we have seen, things could definitely be escalated in no time, and Israel is in between, waiting to see what will happen with the agreement, if at all, and where this agreement is going to position Iran in terms of redeveloping the nuclear capacity. I'll leave that for Wednesday. Will Hezbollah disarm in Lebanon? This is a question many Lebanese are asking, including the newly created government. Joseph Aoun, he is a Maronite. This is actually true Lebanese who would like to do something instead of speaking about two states with two notions. We would recommend Macron to come here and to help out Lebanon getting rid of the barbarians which are named Hezbollah and create once again a greater Lebanon. But this is just a recommendation. I'm not sure they are going to follow. So this is Syria. Look at that. This is a very, very complicated issue. If I would have to explain it to you, look at that. This is Idlib. This is the ghetto where those Islamists actually were sheltered when Bashar al-Assad was in Damascus. These are remnants of ISIS. And they were controlled and ruled by Muhammad al-Jawlani, that until recently named himself after the Jolan or Golan Heights because he was uprooted, or his family was uprooted from here in 1981. Now he is named, as he should be, Ahmed al-Shara, which is his real name, and is trying actually to be confined or to confine his activities to independent Syria. This is Suwaida. This is Jabal al-Durus. What these guys actually were through in the recent weeks is horrors. It's 7th of October, one should say. Babies were smashed with their heads into the wall. Women were slaughtered. Something that cannot be spoken or cannot be dealt with by words. And here's the problem here. What is going to be done with Druze? Because Israelis cannot let them left behind. If they are going to be left here unprotected, they are going to be slaughtered. And let me tell you one more thing. The world would say nothing. I can assure you, nothing at all. Do you know how many Jews were slaughtered during the recent 2 weeks there?
2,000?
3,000, 3,500. So a little bit more than 3,000. Slaughtered. Babies, women, men. Just try to think of it. Where is the world? The world is dealing only with gas. Yes. Have you heard about Sudan? Have you heard about Congo or Rwanda? Have you heard about Nigeria? No. There is only one problem in the Middle East. You know, if to make a long story short, this is exactly what Iran has been said since 1979. You would like to solve out the problems of the Middle East? Make Israel be demolished, be disappeared, be vanished. That's all. You would like a better world? Make the United States be vanished. Here you have the great Satan. In Persian it is called Shaitan Bozorg. And little Satan, Jawi, followers of the great Satan in the Middle East. Now people would take it on seriously because what is these rubbish or dirty slogans mean? But if you come to think of that, you have to admit to yourself that the lunatics may run crazy. Yes. You have to take it into account. Israel didn't take it into account before the 7th of October atrocities. And in my opinion, that would never happen in Israel from now on. This is why Israel cannot get back to status quo ante, as Hamas forces it to do. But we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, here is Turkey with those red spots. Turkey haven't been waiting too long and got into Syria after backing Ahmed al-Shara and just control these territorial slices to make sure that Kurds of Syria are not going to bother Turkey anymore. What Israel should do, and this is being discussed these days, is kind of an agreement here when it comes to the southwest of Syria, southeast of Syria, with Damascus as the capital city of Ashara, but he cannot move heavy weaponry southwards. Jews are going to be protected, and there would be sort of an agreement where Israeli forces and local militias are going to support the security here, and this whole thing is going to be protected by the United States and maybe Europe. So nobody would like to tear apart Syria into different states or small states, because that would be an open invitation for troublemakers to get in. So let him live here. He's going to be supported by the United States. He says that he is going to make Syrians actually be much more happy than ever before with their own country. We'll have to wait and see. But since we are not listening carefully to what is being said when it comes to Ahmed al-Shara, just to be on the safe side, we have to just make sure that kind of an agreement regarding security in southern Syria is going to be implemented that way, that the very, very security interest of Israel and Jordan are not to be harmed. Because if the bad guys are toppling the king in Jordan, this goes to Judea and Samaria and to Israel proper. So you see, the game is pretty complicated. You can't deal with your own immediate borders only. You have to come up with a calculus that would actually broaden up the scope and create maybe a platform which would be very effective if you would like to better protect your interests. This is Sueda in Syria. These are the Druze. We don't have time to deal with that, but according to Ibn Taymiyyah, who is a great Sunni preacher of the medieval times, these are not to be tolerated at all. Jews and Christians, yes, because they are people of the book. They, Alawites, when it comes to Jabal Alawi, as it's Jabal Durus, Yazidis, and even Kurds, not to be tolerated. Just be slaughtered because they are fake Muslims. And you can do nothing about that. Because once actually those poisoned young people rushing in with this agenda, these people are doomed, and they know it. And this is why for the first time, Jews of Syria call upon Israel to come to the fore. And this is what Israel did. What does Hamas want? He doesn't want that. Israel tried actually to take control over the humanitarian aid. If you are going to do that, you are going to strip Hamas of his civilian capacities. See what I mean? He loses control over the people. So Israel has to skip that. Let the United Nations distribute the humanitarian aid. So nice. But United States is synonym for Hamas, as we have proved actually in the recent 2 years. But there are good news for Israel. And the good news is that states in the region learned a lesson. They were so anxious about Iranian ambitions. They were so fearful of Iran, especially Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Egypt. Sunni, one would say, moderate states. States who would like to foster a different future for themselves. States who began thinking in a different way than the typical way actually was, or typical thought was, when it comes to them in the Middle East in 20th century. Look at that. I don't know if you are familiar with that. This is the Abrahamic Center in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is the capital city of United Arab Emirates, a state that came to normalize relations with Israel 5 years ago. I had the honor to be part of that when it comes to cultural ties and academic ties and stuff like that. But I can tell you one thing. Cooperation between United Arab Emirates and Israel nowadays is skyrocketing, unprecedented by any standards. You know what is that? This is the Abrahamic Center. Mosque, synagogue, church. What is the notion of this state? And this is being corroborated in the textbook, in the museums. Just simple as that. I have to respect the otherness of the other. That way, I can deal with the other, and I could manage or foster a give and take platform with which to benefit myself on the basis of win-win cooperation. Haifa, Israel, Amman, Jordan. If Saudi Arabia is in, this is Riyadh, in a broadened Abraham Accords platform. This is Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And if you want to go further, this is Mumbai. That's the plan. Infrastructure is there. It's not something that has to be produced. What we are missing is a normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. This is the shortest, the cheapest, the most effective, smooth transition from what they call the Far East through the Middle East and the Near East toward Europe. It's energy, people, merchandise, or heavy. It curtails the influence of China, which is coming through the same or chasing the same destination, but coming from belt and road strategy, continent and sea. Okay? Those Chinese arms were to be merged here in the eastern flank of the Mediterranean and moved to Europe. This is an American response to a rising Chinese domination in the Middle East. Why does the United States need that? Because this is a way, without sending troops on the ground or without positioning boots on the ground, to create a platform which is being protected from behind and being supported from behind by the United States and Europe, which stands in sharp contrast to Chinese interests and other superpowers' interests in the region, maybe Russia, and beyond we can talk about Iran and the like. What do you say, Charles? Should I stop here? 5 minutes more? Okay. Okay. We just want to show you that. This is Bahrain. Very tiny. But this is kind of a protege of Saudi Arabia. What Bahrain can offer is a lot of oil facilities, oil industry facilities in the Persian Gulf. This is Persian Gulf, of course, when I'm here. Why? This is Persia or Iran. They would look at this. They would look at this waterway, and in Persian, they would name it Khalij Fars, which is Persian Gulf. And by the way, this is also the international name of the waterway. But if I'm going to move to the other side, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and Saudi Arabia, all of them, how you define those states? In terms of the ethnic, what are they? Arab state. So here is the thing, if I am in Abu Dhabi and I'm using the phrase Persian Gulf, it would just politically incorrect, so to speak. It would be Al-Khalij al-Arabi in Arabic, which means the Arabian Gulf. And this is not kind of a semantic note. This is to tell you that Persians and Arabs have been long at loggerheads when it comes to this waterway, and one can definitely say that while browsing into the history of this region, you would definitely talk about Persian-Arab rivalry. This stands as kind of a platform which can explain, among other things, the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or the mutual suspicion. Not to say that the situation between Turks and Kurds is better, or even between Turks and Persians, or Persians and Azeris, or Baluchis. So once again, our advice to Israel is not only not ignore the Middle East, get into it. Learn the Middle East. Be familiar with its peculiarities. Make sure you are not missing any opportunity to make yourself better when it comes to such platforms. Israel is very, very central in that kind of a thing. If you would like to dream, here is the port of Gaza. But in order to start dreaming about Gaza's port, you have to get rid of Hamas. Now, who's going to do that? Everybody sits in Geneva, in London, in Paris, and say, I have a solution. What the solution is? All hostages are being returned into Israel. One shot, all of them, which means 50. In brackets, Hamas cannot bring them all, because if he is being left with no hostages at all, he knows he is doomed. Okay? But you know, when you are coming up with a wishful thinking, you tend to skip the unimportant, so to speak, letters. They are very important. So what the plan is, make them be back, be returned to Israel. We're going to build up a government which is going to be manned by Palestinians, good Palestinians, like the good Shiites that were to rebuild Iraq after Saddam was toppled. You know, the Americans brought enlightened Shi'i Iraqis from the Sorbonne and Oxford and many other universities. You know what happened to them after several months? They were not to be found on the ground, but beneath the ground. Why? They were taken as collaborators with the West. Just simple as that. I'm not trying actually to put that by irony, but this is actually the way these people think. Israel should be there. Why? This is the future. Nobody here became a Zion lover. Nobody has kind of a, I don't know, a badge of Chibat Zion. No. What these states are doing is for the sake of themselves. Ecology, water, desertification, Mother Nature, renewable energies. What do you think? Where do they can find a good laboratory for all these stuff? In the Middle East. Israel, they know it. Israel should respect them, not to patronize them. Talk to them in a manner of give and take. And there could be kind of a win-win cooperation here. This could serve not only as ecological, economic, but also as a geopolitical platform with which to block troublemakers like Iran and others to turn the Middle East into a region of chronic instability. Stop here.
Thank you, Uzi. As always, a profound overview of the situation. So does anybody have any comments or questions? Gilad.
I have three very brief questions.
Maybe you make one.
I have only one question divided into three. Firstly, why did Hezbollah not attack Israel following 7 October immediately, and what happened to the 100,000 missiles? I know some of them were fired. The second one is about your vision, your prediction for the future, 1, 2, 3 state solution, etc. And the third one is your analysis of the failure of 7 October, given that the government, 8200, etc., have experts like you. What happened?
Should I take it?
If you wish, or you want to collect a few, up to you. That's
Yeah, if you would like to just, okay.
up to you. You wanna-
No, I mean, that's okay. So just remind me what were the questions.
First of all, Hezbollah.
Hezbollah didn't actually go for it because he remembered 2006. There was a second Lebanon war. Without being permitted by Iran, he kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers, and that was the opening shot of the second Lebanon war, when Israel actually literally demolished the Dahya, where Iran actually has spent a lot of money and energy, and they threatened Hezbollah not to do that again, because otherwise Nasrallah is out of the picture. So Hezbollah was waiting for Iran. Iran actually was looking at what's going on in the Middle East, and Iran was at a stage that was so highly motivated and highly encouraged that they thought that it would be very, very useful to stay put and see who is on the list or who could be enlisted to this effort too. And this is why, this is kind of something from heaven. Israel was not attacked from the north, where the numbers were to, skyrocket in comparison to the south, because it is Galilee, it is the Golan Heights could be, and thanks God, actually, we were jumping over this hurdle and dealt with the south by itself. Thereafter, of course, what Israel did in Lebanon is to just destroy the capacity of Hezbollah in terms of missiles. But again, you are coming up with the extra value, which is the pagers. What you did there is just to wound more than 1,000 commanders of Hezbollah. They couldn't get back to normal as commanders, I mean. That was kind of a huge and grave psychological shock, as I said before. And when the son of Hassan Nasrallah was delivering a speech in memoriam of his father 2 weeks after his father's death, he said that his father was one person before the pagers saga or affair, and another one after. And this is what we have to just bear in mind. Hezbollah was shocked by that. He was very, very, lost his immunity, so to speak, and thought of Israel as something that is, I won't say invincible, but something that in the neighborhood of invincibility. In Syria, Israel in 3 days destroyed the army of Bashar al-Assad. When Bashar al-Assad was, fleeing to Moscow, Israel was rising to the occasion and just demolish the whole army. So Syria starts from scratch now.
How did it happen?
7th October just happened, you know. Sorry? The third question, how did 7th of October happen?
And why do you say it will never happen again? You said it will never.
I take my words back.
Okay.
Because we said that in 1973, you know, Yom Kippur War, this would never happen against Israel. You know, with the passage of time, you have new generations coming to the fore. They think of that as something that belonged to the past. And they say, actually, in Hebrew, say, I mean, this something is not going to happen to me. Definitely not. You know, the main enemy of Israel is
Israel
itself. Israel itself. We know how to lie in kind of a very manipulative manner when it comes to us. We know how to postpone things. In Hebrew, we know how to say, "Yeh beseder." Don't worry. Don't take it to the extreme. Don't exaggerate. I mean, this is a very, very typical problem of human beings, you know. Is there anyone of you that didn't say to himself or herself, it is very, very important to be dealt with now, but now I don't have the time and energy, I will do that later on. This is exactly what Israel did. It was there, written on the wall. But for some reason you can convince me that this color is not green. I don't know if that is that green. I don't know, but let's say, is it green? You can convince me. If you would like me not to do something dramatic, if you would like me to let it go for the time being. So I know that many young Israelis we are waiting for them because they have to take Israel and to take the lead in Israel for the rest of the 21st century. They should come to the fore. They have been there in Gaza and Lebanon. They sacrificed themselves. And they know if you are going to snooze, you are going to lose. That's as simple as that. Yes, please.
Thank you again. On the topic of Israel being its greatest enemy,
Sorry?
as you said, if the diagnosis is that Israel is its greatest enemy, there is another front to this war that is not always talked about, at least by Israelis, which is the public opinion war. And obviously Hamas's war aims are to turn the West against Israel. And by any accounts, they seem to be being very successful at the moment. Do you think that there is an appropriate level of prioritization of trying to respond to what Hamas wants to achieve by the current administration, particularly with the kinds of characters that are in the cabinet? And the second sort of thing, not to do three but only two, is you haven't said a whole lot about Qatar. And in this organization, we focus a lot on Qatar, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about Qatar and Iran.
Another lecture about Qatar, so maybe we'll do that in, Charles, maybe on Wednesday we should, okay, 10 minutes for Qatar.
12.
Yeah, 12. Okay, we'll do that because this is something, this is another thing which is very, very strange, but people do not ask themselves the right questions. So it goes without saying that Qatar is a cunning, I guess you have kind of a lecture about that or something? Yeah. The most cunning and shrewd player in the world. You know how many people we have in Qatar citizens? 400,000. Sorry? 300,000. 400,000? Oh, I know about 3, but let's say 400,000. How many people do we have in Qatar? More than all.
2.5 million.
Not 2.5, 1.8. Okay? This is the richest country. And I'm going actually to do the per capita capitalism. And what they are doing is that they buy or buy off almost everything. Now, we know, and Charles can tell more than me about it, they have taken control over the academia here in Western Europe, in the United States, not today. It has been 20, 25 years at the least. They controlled faculties of humanities and social sciences. They just bought them off. And brought in people who rewrote the narrative or restructured history memory with regard to the Middle East. Middle East. Of course, it has to do with Western imperialism, the vicious white people. So it's not only Israel, but Israel was to become an epitome of all these defects. We don't have time to delve on it, but look at this guy coming to, what's his name, Zahran Mamdani, New York. This is a byproduct of this education. BDS, pure, very articulate, very, very ready to move with its own agenda, which would explain that Israel is the ANC. And Israel is blaming itself. Many Israelis say, where is the Hasbara? Hasbara, as if I have to just sit. They would say that I am starving deliberately Gaza, and Israel is the, I don't think that there is in a history kind of a precedent where a state is providing its enemy so much aid while in war, and at the end of the day being accused by the deliberate starvation. This is miracles. But social media, people's minds is twisted. I've been yesterday to London, coming from London. A very nice demonstration nearby Hyde Park. People are shouting. What do they shout? From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. So where is Israel? No Israel at all. This is in Arabic, something that was taken from the Hamas chart of 1988. دولة واحدة خالدة من النهر إلى البحر. This is what I said now in Arabic. One state from River Jordan to the Mediterranean. And some people, ignorant as they are, were telling me after actually approaching them that what they just said is in favor of 2 states for 2 people. You can take people who haven't got a clue about where the Middle East is and teach them in just no time what should be said, who is to be blamed for all of this, and who is the victim. Now, I won't actually stand there and argue against that because those people actually are locked.
But we need them.
Sorry?
We can't lose the West. That's the point.
The West has lost itself.
Yes.
You can say you can lose the West, but I can show you. I don't know if Charles actually brought it in. Are you familiar with the Interior Ministry report in France?
I think you're giving up too easily on the West.
Yes.
I'm not giving up. I've been there actually 25 years ago with my friends here in London universities. I'm very sorry to say that. And I think it's a very bothering thing. But if you think that the West is there, I wish you are right. Can you tell me what the West is doing exactly in order to block that?
No, we have to help them. We have to educate them.
You know, Macron has a solution. Instead of dealing with his own problem, but he can't deal with that because, you know, those guys are going to go to the streets and come up with demonstrations that could kill him politically. And those guys actually are well connected to the progress, to the left wing. In my opinion, liberal Europe, and sorry for putting it that way, and I hope I'm wrong, and I would be the first to come here and to say how wrong I was. The liberal world is being fallen into the cracks. You can see that. Where is Angela Merkel? Where is Tony Blair? Macron? These people are becoming irrelevant because they are reacting to challenges coming from within. It would be a lot easier to deal with 2 states for 2 people than dealing with the problems in France. Now, sadly put, I hope that I'm wrong, but I know actually what happened in France, and there is a report that was invited or by the Interior Ministry saying loud and clear that Muslim societies, citizens of France, descendants of, not descendants, offsprings of Muslim Brothers branch, are controlling now the whole apparatus of societal aid, social welfare, and education in France. This is not being published because the French know that if that is being published, it would create kind of an imbroglio. That would be a real problem. So to conceal things, to say that maybe in the future it would be better to postpone things, this is exactly what I told you about Israel before the 7th of October. One day, I don't know how close it is it, you will hear that in a certain country in Western Europe, the train has been left, or has left the station. If you can go to Marseille and live there and tell me that you can bring back things to status quo ante, I can't believe it. I hope that you're right, but I can't believe it. So let's hope. And as in Israel, you should say now in Europe, let's hope for the good, prepare for the worst. If you are there, that's good. In my opinion, most Europeans are not there at all. At all. They even don't understand what we are talking about now. This is my take. Charles, frankly, I hope I'm wrong. I don't want actually to just offend
I
somebody.
hope you're wrong, but tragically, I think you're right. Professor Chavez. Professor.
I also think that you are right. And because I think you're right, the question is, how do we still achieve our objective on behalf of Israel in light of what you've shared? What my colleague asked about the West is not necessarily states of the West or nations of the West. It is the consciousness of the West, the consciousness of the people that are being constantly fed misinformation, disinformation through social media.
Yeah.
I was just looking at Madison Square Garden back in New York, where the Wu-Tang Clan, that's a hip-hop clan, filled up the whole place, but the keynote speaker was Mandela. Young people just went wild over his presence. But his presence is preceded by hours and hours, seconds and seconds of misinformation and disinformation. I'm talking about the whole world, even in Israel, social media. So how do we deal with the consciousness of not just the West, but I would say the consciousness of humanity needs to be better raised with the truth that you have spoken?
Frankly, I don't know. I don't think we can deal with that. We are, as many scientists put it, we are in the post-truth era. There's no truth. It depends actually who are you listening to let me kind of an idea what you are going to come up with. What I know is that if you would like to change things, it has to do with education. It has to do with a revolution in the educational curricula. You know, I mean, I can tell you, I was sent to the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, before the Abraham Accords actually were signed. My question was, what happened there? How an Arab country talk about Israel that way? For example, Israel has the right to exist. Are you sure? Yes, Israel has the right to exist. Israel should be named Israel, and not Palestine when it comes to the maps being taught in the textbook. We've been there several months, going through the curriculum, going through museums, and you know what we found? We found that this state has managed to change what we call the Emirati ethos. They have been shaping Emirati citizens that way that by any standard, I have to respect you even if you are different than me. So many Israelis actually coming with me to the United Arab Emirates were so fearful in the beginning. What if they would know that we are Jews? And they were shocked by my response. Because I said, who cares? If you are you and we are as me, I mean, if you are, and I'll put it in a way that was put by Bahraini counterpart in Manama. Are you normal people? Yes, definitely. Me too. So can you explain to me why we do behave as abnormals? Let's do things together. But the thing is, if that I know nothing about you, that is not only an ignorance. This is incapacity to interact. And we need to interact. So what is so fascinating in the Abraham Accords is that students come together. Is that young people are becoming to learn about each other. We don't talk about politicians. It is not top down, but in a way bottom up. This is very, very important. But who has the patience, the energy to start dealing with that? Because what I just said is a generation story, a generational story. I hope that that would be seen in the Middle East. I do believe that because there are many Arab states who came to the conclusion that they are not going actually to feed their population or to foster a better future while dealing with Israel back and forth. Israel is not the problem. They know it. And Israel is not the enemy. They know it. Well, Israel should be criticized, can be criticized for this and that, but Israel is not an existential threat for them. If that is the point of departure, we can do a lot of things. But we have to be patient. We have to give it some time. And I'm pretty sure that in the long run, we're going to see that in the Middle East. As for Europe, we shall see.
So on this note, unfortunately we ran out of time, but the good thing is we have Uzi back for another lecture. So Uzi, on behalf of everybody here, I know we can listen to you for many hours, so thank you for sharing your
Thank you
wisdom.
so much, guys.
Enjoy your lunch, and we'll reconvene at 2:30.